This is Major with the Darshan Talks podcast. I'm here with our guest star, Darshan Kulkarni. In today's podcast, we're going to talk about the top 5 agreements you want in place when starting any business. Darshan, nice to have you on the show.
I can't believe I'm being introduced onto my own podcast. There's something really weird about it, Major.
First time anyone who has listened to the Darshan Talks podcast has heard your name. In any case, today we're going to go over the top 5 agreements you want in place when starting any business. What are they?
This is the Darshan Talks podcast. Regulatory guy, irregular podcast with host Darshan Kulkarni. You can find the show on Twitter at Darshan Talks or the show's website at darshantalks.com.
So let's start with the first one. The first one is the operating agreement. So if it's you and like 4 friends starting this company, you want to have a clear direction on what agreement, how you will work with each other. That's your operating agreement. So if you go to one of the commercial registration companies, they'll typically provide you with this agreement, but you often want to customize it because the last thing you want are stock rules that don't apply to you and now you're stuck with. So it's critical that you go in and create a operating agreement that is very clear about what each of your roles is and what each of your responsibilities are. This operating agreement will also be quite essential when you go to open up a bank account. They're going to ask for this copy. So the first one you want to have is that operating agreement. Now, it becomes less important, obviously, if you are a solo practitioner starting your own company on your own. But even then, the bank's still going to ask for this document. So you probably want to have something in place there. But obviously, in those situations, it's a little bit easier because if you're the only one, you don't care what the terms are because you can always change those terms.
Okay.
So
number 1, operating agreement.
Yep.
You need the clear understanding of how you're going to work together. It also it assigns the responsibilities of who is responsible for what. Now, where do you get a document like that? You mentioned you can find one in a box store maybe and then customize it. But is there anywhere else you could get that?
So you can obviously reach out to us and we'll help you create an operating agreement that's right for you. But you can also go, for example, your legal Zooms of the world probably have some version of an operating agreement. You can even do like a simple Google search. But I'd caution you with things like LegalZoom and a simple Google search, not because that's the wrong direction, but because if you don't know what you're doing, you might walk into trouble. And the whole goal of this is to prevent trouble. So be aware, right. Be considerate. The second one is your confidentiality agreement. And this becomes really important because if you are in a situation where you're going to start engaging with people and they want to talk to you about confidential information, they're going to be really, really shy. And if they're going to be shy, they aren't going to give you all the information that you need to be able to do your job right. So this confidentiality agreement is often that peace handshake, if you will, that says you can hold me responsible if things go awry. And it sets out the terms of a typical engagement where we haven't signed up with each other, we haven't engaged with each other. This is the rules for us to be confidential. True. The honest truth is confidentiality agreements overall are really difficult to enforce, but they create a base that's really useful to actually talk to each other with. So the goal of the confidentiality agreement when you're creating it or when you have a template of it is not to say, oh, now I can sue you. You might be able to, I'm not saying you can. It's just a more difficult path to take. But what it does is it makes people comfortable, and that's really, really useful.
I'd imagine that, getting into an agreement where your initial concern is, can I sue you? That may not be the best driving force for that, it's not gonna end well. Like if you're expecting to sue somebody like that, right?
Correct.
Or if you're entering that agreement with the intention to sue.
Exactly. The idea
knowing
is
you're going to sue.
It is just putting in some meets and bounds. It has helped building that bridge of trust between your two companies. So if you're going to give someone a secret recipe on how to make your pharmaceutical product, if you are building a secret recipe on someone else making your software device, software as a medical device, In those situations, your CDA is often very, very important. But your CDA is that first step. What happens after that is you'll typically go, okay, here's the type of information I need. Can you do it? And that person may hopefully say, or the company may hopefully say, yes, we can do it. And in those situations, what you'll do is you'll try to hire them as a contractor. So you'll create a contractor agreement. And that's another template you want to have in place.
Okay, so of the 5 agreements you want in place, you want the operating agreement, you want the confidentiality agreement, right?
Yep.
The CDA.
Yep.
And then you just mentioned the contractor agreement.
Yep. I should add, by the way, the CDA is often also known as an NDA. So the CDA being confidential disclosure agreement, NDA being non-disclosure agreement. They both mean the same exact thing, but different people will use it differently. So don't get confused when that comes up. The third one is the contractor agreement, like you just mentioned, like we just discussed. And again, the idea is you don't work for me. I need you to do a fixed job for me and then leave. And there are rules that come into play. So, for example, if you're in California, they have very strict rules on who can be considered a contractor. The EEOC has very strict rules on who can be considered a contractor. So be careful of who you make a contractor. The IRS would not be happy with you if you do things in the wrong way. So you are allowed to have contractors, but they need to meet certain criteria. If you have questions about what those criteria are, reach out to us on Twitter at Kulkarni Law Firm, and we'd be happy to talk to you.
So that's really interesting. I mean, yes, absolutely. There are rules about who's considered to be a contractor. That's rather important because you don't want your neighbor, you're just cleaning out the garage for whatever reason. You're helping mow the yard, and then next thing you know, you're a contractor. You're getting like a 1099 in the mail,
right?
Because for whatever reason, it's just like, what? I don't.
Which actually makes sense. What you're pointing out though, Major, is a really important thing, which is in many situations with contractors, it's not just this agreement that has to be signed. There are often other agreements that may or may not be relevant to you, but are important to the types of filings you have to make with the IRS. You talked about the 1099. So you may have to also have other documents filled out. So when you're doing that, make sure you keep that in mind. So whether you're talking W-2s or W-9s and et cetera, those all need to be considered.
So, if it's your neighbor, make sure they're not pilfering your mail. So yeah, that's the other thing. So we have the operating agreement, we have the CDA or NDA, non-disclosure agreement, we have the contractor agreement. Now you mentioned that the contractor agreement is not for employees. Is there an employee agreement?
Exactly right. So your next version is an employee agreement. And what that means is this person's going to come work for you. You now have to fill out a bunch of forms. You may often need to register in the relevant state. You may often need to register to say that you're doing business in that state. You may often need to do quarterly filings or monthly filings, depending on who this employee is. So that becomes relevant as well, all of which may need to happen. And an employee agreement is, again, on top of all of that. You want to have a template agreement that you can start off with and fill out to say, here are the basic terms that we want to have in place. We'll probably change out the name, maybe change out the jurisdiction, change out the term, blah, blah, blah. But you want to have that. And again, we should specify, we do actually provide templates for those people who are interested. We can create a template packet for you for one or all of these contracts so that you have them in place. Feel free to reach out to us if you have questions about it. But that's your fourth type of agreement.
So 5 agreements you want in place when starting any business: your operating agreement, your CDA or NDA, non-disclosure, your contractor agreement, or your employee agreement. What's the fifth one?
So the fifth one is,
we're saying 5 here.
Yeah, at this point in time, it's really impossible for most companies or most individuals to really work without having some kind of online presence. It's your virtual storefront. So in those specific situations, you want to have very clear expectations on what people can do on your website, what can they depend on, what are the terms and conditions. So the terms and conditions is actually another type of agreement. What you want off of that website is a terms and condition that talks about maybe privacy policies, that may actually have just your terms and conditions that may or may not include your privacy policies. I caution against having a privacy policy unless you have a clear understanding of what you're going to do. So often I just have a terms and conditions. Go ahead.
You said terms and conditions and privacy policy. You're using those interchangeably. Are they different? Are they the same?
They're often different documents. They're often different documents. The first is the terms and conditions, which is just, here's what this website represents. Here's what you can rely on. Here's what you can't. On the other hand, the privacy policy is what we're going to do with the information we collect on you. You may not be collecting any information, in which case you may or may not want a privacy policy or just include it within your terms and conditions. On the other hand, if you are, say, Facebook, and that's the business you're in, you very much want to have a privacy policy. You want to have a very clear perspective on what you're going to do with people's information and inform them of that. And that's becoming more and more important when you're talking about things like GDPR, when you're talking about things like CCPA or even the new CIPRA law. So
membership sites where they handle more personal information, they're going to want to have a different page maybe, because it's going to be quite more extensive than if you're just selling farm equipment, right? So you would need a different page maybe for the privacy policy to kind of elaborate on what that means. Or if you don't have a membership site and if you have a smaller business, then maybe you can include the privacy policy in with the terms and conditions.
Exactly.
That's what
right.
I think you're saying.
That's exactly what I'm saying. So those are 5 agreements.
There you go. So just to be clear, top 5 agreements. Well, the 5 big agreements really are the operating agreement, your CDA, your NDA, your non-disclosure, which I didn't realize the goal was to create that base confidence, not really to keep everything hush hush, but it's more so, hey, we're on the same page. We're talking about this. We agree that this is an important milestone in the business or in this idea as we go forward. But anyway, that's number 2. Number 3, we have a contractor agreement. Number 4 is the employee agreement. Number 5, this is specifically for the website, terms and conditions and the privacy policy for your website. Now, Darshan, you said that you are able to package this up or to have templates of these, and you can certainly Google this and go to LegalZooms of the world, as you said, and get the template, but you're going to want to customize each of these specifically to your situation, because an NDA for a pencil is going to be different from an NDA to a piece of software or software idea.
Yeah.
So what do you mentioned that you offer templated agreements. How does that work?
So what they'd often come up and say is, look, I just need a template for one of those agreements, and we can happily help you with that. What might also happen is you might say, you know what, I know I'm going to need all 5. Can you give me a template for all 5? And we can give you at a discounted rate what those templates would be. Now, if you want those customized for you, that'd be obviously an additional charge. But we can create different versions of this that is right for you, depending on the level of customization you want. In some cases, we've had people say, you know what, give me the templates. I'll create a custom version and can you just review it for me? We can do that as well. So feel free to reach out to us. We're happy to talk to you through a lot of these questions and kind of go from there.
All right. Well, I have no questions on this side.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
This is the Darshan Talks podcast. Regulatory Guy, Irregular Podcast with host Darshan Kulkarni. You can find the show on Twitter at Darshan Talks or the show's website at darshantalks.com.